All right, can you guys, Tom, you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Always like to check before I get rolling. All right. Ahoy, quality management people. Welcome to this episode of our Quality Solutions series. Thank you for joining. Glad to have you with us today. Today we're talking essentials for first time or perhaps been a long time QMS software buyers. As always, all registrants will receive a link to the recording, and be sure to use that GoToWebinar panel to ask questions or share your thoughts during the presentation, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. I'm Angela Anderson, Product Marketing Manager with ETQ, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tom Barlow, one of ETQ's in-house quality experts and strategic solution engineer. Say hello to the good people, Tom.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today.
All right, so in today's session, we aim to help you organize your planning and preparation for making a QMS software purchase. So just a little intro to ETQ. For over 30 years, we've empowered quality champions to use quality management as a catalyst for business success. Full disclosure, we offer a flexible, scalable, easy to use EQMS solution that's purpose-built to connect quality processes to all areas of your organization. We have industry knowledge and expertise across many industries, which is reflected in our diverse customer base of over 600 customers representing discrete and process manufacturing, food and bev, consumer goods, pharma, med device, the list goes on, services and more. We aim to be a trusted advisor to our customers, helping guide them along their quality journey from business case to project planning to onboarding and beyond. We are a part of Hexagon, a global leader in sensor, software, and autonomous manufacturing solutions. Folks, it's a jungle out there. The headlines remind us every day the challenges of maintaining product quality are greater than ever with rising costs, natural disasters, continuing supply chain disruptions. At our Hexagon Live customer event last year, the CEO of Hexagon, our parent company, said during his keynote that in an industry, for example, like automotive, 80% of the value chain is suppliers. To me, that says delivering on further a shared promise of quality is also more important and challenging than ever. The headlines may be grim, but all hope is not lost. Your secret weapon is quality. We believe you can proactively mitigate all kinds of risks and shift your stance from reactive to proactive through the practice of quality management. And it's not just compliance, but the kind of quality management that harmonizes your processes and creates feedback loops across your organization that ensure issues are handled and preventive actions rule the day. If you can do this consistently, your business will rise above the rest and gain that competitive advantage. And one key ingredient to getting there is having the right tools in place. I might be a little biased, but purpose-built EQMS technology is critical to harmonize global processes and automating closed loop workflows. So let's take a look at how. Kind of starting at the other end of the spectrum, the challenges with paper-based systems are well understood. With paper, everything is just manual and painful, and the processes are not flexible. It's a static system that makes it hard to get through even simple revision workflows. Sometimes pieces of paper mysteriously disappear, sending you kind of back to the beginning to reprint. Moving to spreadsheets and documents on SharePoint can help you shed paper, but it doesn't get you far in this journey to closed loop quality. It's still hard or impossible to share information across systems, so quality data just remains siloed. And there's not an insignificant downstream impact on the amount of work it takes to create reports. Having a hodgepodge of legacy point solutions is also inefficient and reinforces silos. So now that I've got everyone sufficiently depressed about paper and legacy systems, yeah, we'll move on. There is a better way, and let's look at it. So it may be tempting to consider a quality module add-on through another business system like an ERP, but you wouldn't use a hammer as a screwdriver. So maybe you would, I'm not sure. So let's take out a look at a few things that make a purpose-built EQMS software uniquely suited to achieve that vision of closed loop quality. One is it's a single source of truth for all quality processes and documentation, not just perhaps the limited things that might matter more to an ERP system, for example, like receiving an inspection. It expands that scope to maintaining compliance, complete traceability, always audit ready. With an EQMS, you can readily show you're actively maintaining compliance with any requirement, and having automated audit trails on any process and related processes only a click away actually might make audits a little bit fun. Maybe that's stretching it, but number three, going beyond digitizing to connecting workflows across the organization. And we call it ETQ, we call this connectivity, and Tom is going to talk more about that in a minute. But combined with visibility to the workflow status is very powerful. This is what truly starts to break down those silos. When field service can drive change in product design, or frontline factory workers can see their feedback realized in improved manufacturing processes, like it's a beautiful thing. Number four, data. When it's all in one system, the data is there for the sharing and communal analysis. Number five, fostering collaboration and a culture of quality. Because the flexibility and possibilities of a good EQMS are so far reaching, it can reinforce that participation in continuous improvement in all areas of your organization. And rounding out the grid here, good QMS will allow you to configure it to your needs versus you needing to adjust it to fit the software. Ultimately, this is going to allow you to be more adaptable and resilient in the face of growth and change, and like we said in the beginning, taking that proactive stance against all those market conditions. That all sounds good, and you want this, right? So how do you get there, you ask? You may be asking. Well, baby steps, but we're going to fast forward a little to thinking about that implementation and where to begin. At ETQ, we kind of use this quality journey maturity framework, you could call it, ignite, accelerate, expand, transform, to help conceptualize the path you'll take. So every day we help organizations define and navigate this path. Every journey is a little different, but there are common elements that provide a well-worn path to success. So for this session, we'll focus on the ignite phase. So these three statements you see here are by far the most common lessons learned reported by customers reflecting on their ignite phase. We hear this over and over again, just out of the gate, defining your top priorities before you get too far down the road, adopt out of the box, and going after easy or early wins to gain that adoption momentum. ETQ's core application set are the most common starting points. It's the well-worn path that gets you up and running and gaining those early wins. And there's a reason why these are the core applications. And in fact, these applications are specially configured out of the box to minimize implementation time and the costs associated with that. So coming up in a little bit, Tom's going to go deeper into the interconnected workflows of these core applications and demonstrate what that some of that looks like in ETQ Reliance. So beyond that, thinking about kind of the core processes that you might want to tackle to further help with prioritizing your plan and where to start, you may also want to think about the ROI impacts. So if you rely on or you're going to be relying on buy-in from teams outside of quality, like finance or IT, to approve that software investment, you may need to communicate the broader business impact of your choices. Pardon me. Our ROI model is built with input from a dozen customers, and it represents real data, and the outcome are a set of benchmarks in four main areas: reducing risk of noncompliance, streamlining operations, reducing costs, and growing and protecting revenue. So a sampling of some of those benchmarks include 50% reduction in number of audit findings, under reduced costs, 3% reduction in scrap costs. So this is like aggregate data from these customers. A 3% reduction in scrap costs, 10% reduction in, oh, sorry, got ahead of myself. All right, streamlining operations, 10% reduction in time spent on document review and approval, 20% reduction in time spent managing supplier corrective action. Back to the cost, so 3% reduction in scrap costs could be huge if you multiply that across many sites, 10% reduction in field failure costs, 40% reduction in new product development timeline. So, products to market faster, faster time to revenue. We can work with you to build, shape this ROI model for your QMS business case and turn these kind of percentage benchmarks into dollars. What's my word? Completely just had a mind space. Okay, so we can turn those benchmarks into dollars that are customized for your case and for your business. And I'm back. Okay, so back to the quality journey. To paraphrase Stephen Covey, let's begin with the end in mind. And it can be helpful to look ahead at the possibilities to kind of inform the decisions that you would make today or in the early days of your implementation. So let's explore that a little. Keep in mind the lines between these phases is to some degree notional. Your exact journey is unique and it's going to be driven by your business needs. So under accelerate, so these are kind of more of these lessons learned that we hear all the time from customers. The idea of taking a phased approach and not trying to do everything at once. And not only the adoption of workflows, but also the rollout to sites and being selective about how you go about that. And in this phase, you might explore adding more application sets like non-conformance handling, or think about some system integrations with ERP or with a CRM. In the expand phase, you may be looking at connecting more teams, more sites, connecting external users. So kind of back to this idea of supply chain being so critical to your overall value chain. Involving suppliers through a supplier portal directly in your quality processes and reducing the friction there. And transform, so that's the perhaps the future face of your organization. It's looking ahead at smart factory and industry 4.0 initiatives, perhaps looking at connected frontline worker integrations and really connecting, like we like to say, connecting shop floor to top floor, and having this end-to-end broader scope of connected processes. So so that's the peek ahead at what some of the things you might want to aim for down the line in this kind of multi-year process, and it really is a multi-year commitment. So I wanted to do before I hand it off to Tom, get ready. Let's do a quick recap on what you should be looking for in a purpose-built QMS. So for some reason, I love looking at the world of quality through this lens of people, process, tools, framework. So I feel like it just simplifies things. So I'm going to apply it here, but I'm going to start with tools. So a purpose-built EQMS, it's fundamentally as a tool, it should allow you to start small and grow over time, and fundamentally as well automate business processes with things like workflows, assignments, notifications, escalations. So automating all of those administrative burden type things that just are a time suck, and the software could just do it for you and make it so much easier. And then thinking about that notion of QMS as a hub, the software should easily integrate with other business systems. So it's not just the tools. There's people involved too. Your QMS vendor, whether it's ETQ or another, It comes with people, and those are the folks who can, help or hinder your success. So you want to look for, at least feel like you can get a sense of whether, they're in it with you for the long term and want to partner in your success. That's definitely the approach ETQ takes, and there's a reason we call it the quality journey, because it is a journey, and we want to be there with you all the way. And finally, from a process perspective, the implementation of EQMS should not leave you with a failed digital transformation project. And the landscape is littered with failed projects. The onboarding should provide an approach that's going to mitigate that risk and ensure that user adoption. And you should look for those cues that the onboarding is going to teach you to fish, kind of like that analogy, because you may need some hand, depending on your needs, you may need more hand holding in the early days, but you should be set up for some independent management down the line where you're not having to rely on the vendor services for every change that you want to make. So just some things to look for, and you can do a little quick mental checklist. People, process, tools is meeting all the needs. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn the spotlight on you, Tom, to show us more about ETQ Reliance and how those core applications provide that solid foundation for the ignite phase of the quality journey. Looks good.
Can you guys see that? Excellent. All right. That was a smooth transition, Angela. That's the way I like it.
Right, right on.
All right. Well, thank you. So what I'm going to do over the next moment or so is really give you an introduction into the Reliance platform. And as Angela said, we're focusing on the first step of their journey, and which is our core applications. So ETQ Reliance is actually a web-based, workflow-based business process automation platform that has 42 pre-configured applications that are built by us with our 30 years of best practices experience on one agile platform. It's one web-based platform that's hosted in the cloud native software as a service to make it extremely easy for your users to access the system from anywhere, including extending the system to external users like suppliers and contractors, which we'll touch on in just a minute. We package it into different application sets that make it easy to emulate your journey. So as we're talking about the initial step, which is the core applications, these are the applications on the left side that would come with our platform to help you get started in your platform and your journey in the quality management world to implement those core processes. And we have a diagram that shows how they all work together in a few moments. And then as your journey proceeds, as Angela mentioned, you can add additional application sets, which include about 4 apps each, 4 additional applications. But the nice thing about this is that they all sit on the same platform. So it doesn't matter what the process is, the system is just as intuitive and easy to use. Everything looks and feels exactly the same within the system. So we're going to be focusing on primarily the core applications during our discussion today. One of the most powerful things about the ETQ Reliance platform specifically is that we have these 6 powerful genetics that are infused across all of our applications. So regardless of what it is, this functionality exists. And the first thing I mentioned briefly already is adaptability or configurability. Even though we configure our system and build our system out of the box based on best practices, organizations can choose to use it as close to as they'd like. And as Angela mentioned, we have some services offerings that can make it extremely easy and fast to get started with our system with this initial step of the workflow, the initial step of the quality journey. But then the system's configuration tool, which is actually what we use ourselves to pre-configure the applications that we provide and package for our customers, can be used to either configure existing applications to meet your own business process requirements. If you need to add new fields to a form or modify the workflow, which is the process that the form goes through to automate the form, you can configure all that using our drag and drop ETQ designer tool. So that it's designed so that non-technical administrators can configure the system without programming. So not only do you not have to engage us as the vendor to do those configurations and set it up, because you can do it yourself once you learn how to do it, but you don't even have to bother your own internal IT team to do it, because it's literally that easy. It's designed to be drag and drop. So it can streamline that process for you and allow you to take complete ownership. Teach you to fish is the concept that Angela mentioned before. We're not just teaching your organization to fish, we're teaching your business users to fish and your business administrators that are managing our system, so that you can take control of our system moving forward. So typically you would start in that journey with these core processes, but then you would add additional things as you go through your journey. And that's the really nice thing about our system, is it can organically grow with you. The other thing that we'll talk about is connectivity, which is the ability to have relationships between processes. So there are a lot of other systems out there that have processes for document control and corrective action and audits and whatnot. But the question is, do they connect as well, where they can have interactions between those processes as they exist in the real world? So document control can launch training that might have to take place related to those documents or revisions to documents. An audit finding could lead to a corrective action, which then leads to an action plan that has other things that have to happen. So those things are all connected. So it seamlessly allows you to trigger processes from other processes to truly establish closed loop quality management. In addition to connectivity, which is the relationships between applications in our own system, we also realize that we don't exist in a vacuum. A lot of organizations have other systems in place that have a single source of the truth, like ERP systems that have things like your suppliers, your customers, your products, your parts and materials that are going into your process. We can integrate with all that information so we can leverage it, so that the people that are managing the information in the existing ERP system, we can leverage that information without someone else having to manage it in our system too. The goal is, once again, Angela mentioned the concept of automation. Our goal is to automate your processes. That includes integration with existing systems. Contextual awareness: as the footprint of your implementation increases within your organization, you can define your organizational structure, whether it's a single facility that has different units or business units or departments in it, or it's a huge multinational company that has different business units across the world in different languages and different locations, where you can define your own structure in a large hierarchy. What contextual awareness essentially does is it knows where a user belongs in that hierarchy when they log in, and can deliver the content only specific to their area of interest within the organization. So that's a huge capability when it comes to increasing the footprint of our implementation. If you're talking about automation, connectivity between processes, integration with existing systems, you want to maximize that opportunity for automation. So with the ability to have different people only see the information that pertains to them, allows you to have, from a security perspective, only what people can see is what they're allowed to see. And then from an ease of use perspective, they can only see the information that pertains to them, and they don't have to worry about all the other stuff that could potentially be in the system. They only see their part of it. But managers that log in from higher up, they can see everything if you want them to. So the contextual awareness allows us to grow across a large enterprise if you have one, and if you don't, we can still support smaller organizations with the same capabilities just as easily, to give you the ability to filter dynamically what people can see and can't see, as well as harmonize. That's a really big concept that we like to use when we talk about implementation in a larger organization, because what most organizations require, or most systems that you would implement require of larger organizations, is what's called standardization, which is a very difficult term to swallow when it comes to large organizations that may have different business units with slightly or very significant differences in their needs on how processes would work. But with harmonization, you're not forced to standardize. You can share common elements where it makes sense across the organization, so that people are using the same fields that mean the same thing across the globe. They're using the same keywords, so you don't have to manipulate any data to be able to do global roll-up reporting. But then you can also have unique parts of the form or unique processes in the workflow to automate different things based on the varying needs. So this allows you to have the best of both worlds. You can support your global requirements across the organization, and you can also have individual business units or even individual locations needs met as well. And that usually increases the acceptance by end users, because the system is closer to their process. What we see in other systems that don't have this capability, they often end up with separate implementations of the same system in different business units or in different locations across the organization. The system is the same across these different locations, but it's not talking to each other. And they can have global processes that everyone has access to. So there's a lot of disconnection and a lot of siloing going on with other systems where we can completely eliminate those silos with ETQ Reliance. Now, if you take the contextual awareness concept, which is the discussion of filtering dynamically based on a location, if you extend that location to external locations like external users, such as contractors and suppliers that often have to participate in the quality management system, whether it's supplier onboarding or responding to supplier corrective actions or whatever the process might be, we can seamlessly incorporate external users using that same functionality that we use for contextual awareness, which then means with things like workflow, which is core to our platform, you can assign things to your supplier. They would receive an assignment email automatically. They would have a home page with a simple list of open items that they have to deal with. And then our escalation tool, as Angela mentioned, which is one of the keys for success of any quality management system, the ability to remind people that they have something to do. That very simple concept of workflow is very simple, but it's also very powerful if you extrapolate across all the different business processes that you can automate, and the ability to incorporate external users where your suppliers can be reminded by our system automatically that something has to be completed in a certain time frame without someone internal to your organization having to manually follow up and invariably not quite get it right and always catch it on time. So that's the idea. And the last one we call anywhere access. Because the system is hosted in the cloud, there are no constraints from a firewall perspective. You know, in historical systems that were on premise, if you will, they were behind a company's firewall, so it was difficult to access from anywhere. It was difficult to incorporate external users like suppliers and contractors. We still have that robust security in the cloud, but it just allows you additional capabilities. In addition to the fact that we support the mobile browsers on tablets like Firefox and Chrome, so you could be walking around doing an audit or whatever the process might be, launching a nonconformance or doing a corrective action on your tablet while you're physically walking around, or doing an audit and answering the questions and using the camera on board to take a picture of the issue as objective evidence. And the other option, in addition to the browser, would be the mobility app that we offer for Apple and Android devices. When I say offer, it's included with the system. It's just a different download. It's a slightly different set of configurations that you can do because the processes for mobility are often a subset of the main process. But then it allows you to not just work offline, but also online. Or excuse me, it doesn't only allow you to work online, but also offline. So you can take an audit from the web version before you go on site somewhere. If you're not sure if you're going to have access to the web, you can download it to the local device. You can complete it offline and then upload it to the web version when you're done. So that's the idea of the introduction to the platform, and those genetics are really, really important because they are infused across all the different processes on the platform. Before we get into the system, to show you this illustration I'm about to discuss, we wanted to discuss really how the core applications, at least the main core applications, work together. So the fundamentals of any quality management system, as you can imagine, is having a document control system. So a lot of organizations use SharePoint. They have disparate things in place. They're not really under control, but they do what they have to just because necessity is the mother of invention. With our system, one of the 5 core apps is called Document Control, which is a workflow-based application to allow you to create, review, approve, distribute, and revise documents electronically. So when someone logs in, they have literally instantaneously have a master list of all the approved documents available to them. And then the contextual awareness that I just mentioned could also filter and only show them the documents that they need. It might show location-specific documents all the way up through corporate documents like policies and procedures that everybody in the organization needs to see. So they can easily see that. And when we log into the system in just a moment, that's one of the first things I'm going to touch on, is the ability for a user to easily access documents. In addition, I mentioned before that you can easily tie document control to training. So not only can we distribute documents and make sure people are aware of documents, but training management, which is another of the 5 main core applications, allows you to define what does training look like. Do you want a group of people to acknowledge their awareness of a document? So not only can they be made aware of it, but the system can track objectively that they've acknowledged it, and it keeps a training record on that as completed? Or do you want them to verify that they read and understood the document by taking a multiple choice test, where they might have a minimum score of 75 or 80% to show that they read and understood the document? Or do you have instructor-led training where you might have a supervisor or department head going over training, where you invite people to a room that you can also track training? So any of those scenarios would be applicable. And the power of power is that even though you don't have to tie training to a document, it could just be a separate training course. Oftentimes, you need to show that training is done related to documents, and our system makes it extremely easy to do that. Now, of course, once you have your documents in place, you have to change those documents. So we do have a separate change management application, which is a workflow-based application that allows you to request changes of any type. It could be just changes to documents, or it could be changes that are much larger in scope that include processes. It could be engineering changes, supplier changes, process changes, any kind of changes that you want to. That's got a workflow that would allow you to have it assigned to the right people for review and approval. This little symbol here represents another core application called the risk register. So as part of your evaluation of that change, maybe you conduct a risk assessment using your own risk matrix with probability and severity for different categories to assess the risk of making or not making that change, which could be part of your impact analysis and feasibility analysis to determine whether you need to make that change. And if you need to make the change, not only can it trigger action items to assign things to people using standard workflow, but it can also trigger a multiple document change request to make sure that any documentation in the system gets changed as well to reflect the change that happened, to keep up with that change. All of this time, connectivity is linking back and forth between all these related records. So it's extremely easy to trace. Once the new version of the document gets revised and approved using the same workflow that the original version did, the original version then automatically moves to an archive, which is also part of the core application set. So this will automatically store any superseded documents that were superseded by a new version. So it's easy to find for those users that have the privileges to do so. So this is really the core, or the main core part of a quality management system, the fundamental part of the core. And the reason I'm being careful with my language is because there are a few other applications that are part of the core that I'm going to be discussing in just a moment. But these are really the fundamental things to establish your quality management system, to make sure people are trained, and ensure that you have a change management process in place. Next, of course, you're going to want to verify your compliance with your quality management system. So we have an application called Audits Management, where you can import all your existing audit types, your checklist and questions that you use. You can do audit planning, you can schedule your audits, you can use the mobile device to complete audits if you want to. Once the audits are scheduled and conducted, of course, you can verify compliance or identify issues where you're not compliant with a requirement, and then launch right from there a corrective action, for example, which is another core application. So corrective action is a very robust process to allow you to approve the corrective action, conduct root cause analysis using any number of tools that we provide. We call it the root cause analysis toolkit, 5Y, fishbone, Pareto analysis, or any other objective evidence you want can be attached. You can do action planning, proposing that you have different actions that have to take place. And this is a place where organizations really struggle oftentimes, is that they don't have a connection between the corrective action and then what has to happen as a result of outputs from the corrective action. So in this case, you might have actions to revise documents or provide training. So those action items are separate workflow-based records that get assigned to the users using standard workflow. So there's no possible way that you can forget that something has to be done. The system would send an assignment email to the person with a hyperlink to the action. It would show up on their homepage as an assignment. So it'll just sit there until they complete it. And then if they don't do it in a timely manner, escalation can track the due date for any step of any of these processes to remind people that they have to get done. But more importantly, from a closed loop perspective, let's say you had an action to review and revise documents and an action to provide training, you can actually provide links to the objective evidence within this action item. So that's the closed loop part that a lot of organizations struggle with. Sometimes during an audit, we've spoken to many customers that have a tremendous amount of stress when it comes to being audited, because there's a little bit of doubt in the back of their mind as to whether they'll actually ever be able to provide the objective evidence that was being asked for, because it depends that someone else was following, or it depends on the fact that someone else was following the process. If they didn't put it in the right directory in SharePoint, or in the right place on your corporate S drive, or worse, on their local hard drive, there's you know, you just can't produce it, and there's a little bit of panic involved, and sometimes you have to get the person involved that actually did the process, which is really not an effective way to audit. With something like our system, there's a clear, consistent way of doing it, as well as providing objective evidence within the actual action item itself, linking to the documents that got modified, linking to the training that was done. We refer to it as a sweat-free audit because there's literally little anxiety around it, because you're just going in and showing the very functional quality management system that's in place. You actually fall into compliance just by using our system. You don't have to do any housekeeping. And what I refer to that as is, you're probably, some of you are probably familiar with what often happens before an audit. You have to run around and close corrective actions and make sure that you're doing things to kind of give the impression that your quality management system is up to date. But the motivation for closing something shouldn't be the fact that there's an audit next week. It really should be that you want to gain the most effectiveness as you can out of the corrective action and ensure continuous improvement. So that's what this story that I just described really allows. And this is really nice how our core applications get you started on that process, on that journey, and how just using these can get you a long way into managing your quality management system. In future sessions, we're going to be talking about additional phases of the journey and how other processes can tie into this, but this is really the fundamental part of it that's a starting point. Another part of the core is a tool that we have called ETQ Insights. So what I just described over here is things that are happening on a day-to-day basis. You're doing audits, you're launching corrective actions, you're doing training, and all of this is generating data automatically. And as I mentioned before, if you have a harmonized system, the data is being entered in a consistent way right from the very start. So you don't have to, let's say when it comes to management review meetings or preparation for reporting, you don't have to do a lot of Excel gymnastics and cleanup of the data. In fact, you don't have to do any if you're using our system like this, because it's validating the data entry when it's first entered. So it saves a lot of time and resources. The other thing that you can do is not only can you do this and use these things for things like management level reports, but you don't have to wait for the occasion of a management report or a management meeting to happen anymore in order to be able to put your finger on the pulse of the quality management system. You can literally log in and jump into the system, and it will give you real-time analysis with drill down and filtering capabilities into what's happening. So the result of that is making much better business decisions faster because you have easy access to the data. You're not spending your time culling the data and putting out fires. What you're doing is you're spending time on continuous improvement, which in and of itself is kind of the core of quality 4.0 and industry 4.0. You're not spending time or fighting or administering a system anymore. You're actually making continuous improvements. The system is doing all the work for you to make sure that you're still compliant. So with that being said, I'm going to do a quick demonstration to make sure that Angela has enough time. So the first thing I mentioned that I would do is log in as a typical end user into the system. And we do support single sign-on, so if that was implemented, you wouldn't have to log in like I just did. It brings the user right to the home page. This is a typical end user that doesn't do much in a day-to-day basis other than carry out their job and do their tasks. They don't participate in any of the other quality processes. This person can see training assignments that are related to the documents that are being created and revised. So the system would have initially sent an assignment email with a hyperlink to this. This is showing up on my homepage. Escalation management's tracking the due date to remind me, but also escalate to my manager and my manager's manager as that due date gets closer. I can also easily bookmark any number of documents to quickly access them right from the homepage. And I can also see a list of approved documents. So this is my master list of approved documents. This is dynamically filtering based on my location in the hierarchy. So this person's from the New Jersey location that's part of the manufacturing business unit that's part of the ETQ hypothetical company. So the same corporate procedures and policies are available to everyone. But as we get further and further down in the hierarchy, the system gets more exclusive as far as what's being made available to the end user. I can also easily filter and search for any document that I want. So with one click, I can see that I have my document. Long story short, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I can easily access my procedure by clicking on this. and it opens up that document for me. In this case, our system has the ability to convert original formats like in Word or whatever into a PDF. So end users can only access the PDF version, and we can also synchronize the header information automatically. And so as a document gets revised, it'll automatically update. So I wanted to quickly show that, just to show what the system looks like. An end user can also bookmark their most commonly used apps right up here. And in this case, I'm just going to close off as this one because I would like to show you another process that's tied into the overall relationships in between the core applications. This is an example of an assignment email that came from the system. It's a corrective action that's in the implementation step. It's got a due date. It has a description of what the problem was. In this case, it was an audit question that launched a corrective action that became this is the subject of the corrective action, so it clearly shows me what the issue is. I can also click on this link and it brings me right to the record in question. So once again, if single sign-on was implemented, it wouldn't require that you log in. It brings you right to the record. This is the corrective action in the implementation step, but the main thing I want to focus on is the connectivity and the efficiency of communication. So someone before me approved it. I can see the name of the person and the date and the time that they approved it. This system inherited the details from the source question in the audits application. It also inherited the details from the audit, so I don't have to retype that information. That's the connectivity capability that I described earlier. The containment was described, the root cause was done, as I mentioned. In this case, the actions were planned. So we have multiple different actions that have different people and dates. Once the action plan got approved and moved to the implementation step, the system triggered child action items for each individual action, which then immediately assigns those actions to different people potentially with different due dates, showing up on their homepage to make sure it gets done. Each action, as I mentioned, can connect to the other processes. So this was an action to review and revise documents. So not only can I say I did the documents or I did the revision to the documents and I close my action after it gets verified, so therefore I can keep track of the actions and what their status is, but I can also link to the objective evidence, whether it's one or more attachments, links to external systems, or links into other records. So if I click on this, this is now the second version of the management responsibility procedure or policy, because this had to be revised as a result. So that link to this came right from the corrective action and the corrective action item. So that's the output, and I'm just quickly touching on this just for the sake of time. The input, as I mentioned, came from an audit finding. So this is a link back to the checklist in the audits application where this issue came from. So we have the questions, we have the hints that were provided as part of the audit type and the checklist template setup. The auditor can put in their comments, they can choose the right response. If they're using their mobile device, by the way, whether it's the browser or the mobile app, they can use the voice to text function to speak into it and capture the details. They can attach objective evidence in the form of pictures and even use the onboard camera. In addition, you can link to documents in document control. So oftentimes when you're doing an audit, more like a desk audit, you might have this procedure has got several questions that you're asking about in the audits application. So what this allows you to do is provide a link ahead of time so that the auditor can easily access the most recently approved version of a specific document that they're being asked about. In this case, this one was an issue. It was a major noncompliance. This was a button that someone clicked and it launched the corrective action number 6 that you can see is still open at the top. I have a link, the tab for that is right up here. So that's really what I wanted to discuss today in terms of the closed loop corrective action process around and the core applications around the initial phase of the quality journey. So Angela, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Are you seeing the screen share?
All right. I do see it.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so at this point, just want to, keep an eye on the time. We did have a couple questions come in. I wanted to walk you guys through a bit of a recap on some key takeaways regarding the Ignite phase of a quality journey, and by way of a recent customer story. So I'll just kind of walk you through, so it's just summarizing those kind of the collection of most heard lessons learned. We've got, defining your top priorities, mapping the plan, taking a phased approach, adopting out of the box, and enhancing as you go. So I'm going to lay that on top of a customer story around Materion. So pardon me. So this story, Materion is a nearly $2 billion global high-tech solutions provider of electronic materials, performance materials, precision optics. They're based in, oh, and I did learn that it's in their precision optics division. They provide kind of high performance coatings and that type of thing. And they did supply some materials and components for the James Webb Space Telescope. So pretty cool stuff they're doing over there. They're based in Cleveland, Ohio, 32 worldwide locations, 3,700 employees, 66 countries are served, a prime candidate for an enterprise grade EQMS. And they are, at this point, about 2 years into their ETQ quality journey. So let's take a look at some aspects of their Ignite phase. Walking in, some of their key pains included having over 20 global sites using kind of multiple solutions. They had a legacy, Lotus Notes-based QMS. They were using spreadsheets, or some sites really just had nothing at all. The lack of standardized business processes made it really impossible to share common documents, and that resulted in just having different versions of the same thing across different places. Inability to roll up results to address issues at the site, business unit, or corporate level. That's kind of that reporting aspect was very challenging. Lots of Excel gymnastics going on, I think. Materion started their journey with us with dot control, training management, corrective action. So sounds familiar, right? At this point, those are core ETQ applications, and I think the number is over 60% of our new customers start with only core apps. So a tried and true place to start. And thinking back to those ROI considerations for Materion, focusing on addressing like efficiency and the streamlining of operations was the most critical kind of ROI area that they were focused on. When we take a look at mapping the plan and taking that phased approach, they were very organized and very clearly mapped out their plan. They mapped the plan and planned for a phased approach, laying out quarter by quarter which applications to roll out at which sites. And another important piece of this planning was choosing the project team and involving their key stakeholders from the very beginning. And it's such a key component of managing change management, we'll say. So this is just kind of a snapshot of one of their high-level overviews of just keeping it very, very simple, but a guiding document on what the intention was going to be with the rollout. Another thing that we hear a lot and that we in turn advise is to not implement your if I may put it bluntly, don't implement your existing bad process. Take time to optimize and think about how you want to make it better before you bring it into ETQ. And that's exactly what Materion did, and they leveraged those out-of-the-box configurations to speed that process, knowing that they could come back later and configure or enhance or add to once they kind of got more user feedback. And that result was faster, lower cost implementation timeline, made it very repeatable for them as they go into new sites. Standardization of the business processes kind of out of the box made it easy across locations to, as a system administrator to support that. It has better enabled their cross-site collaboration. So it's team members perhaps go from site to site when they log into the system. It's everyone's kind of looking at the same way of doing things. It has helped them create a strong base of power users that better supports system adoption. So from site to site, it's the same, and so they were able to more quickly build those users, at their different sites, and have that, kind of feet on the street um, evangelism. The standardized data and easier to roll up and analyze metrics was huge for them, just making it so much easier to report at whatever level they needed to. And then, making upgrades has been much easier just by kind of adopting that quick out of the box. And then the other thing they highly recommend is taking advantage, we talked about this, teaching you to fish component, and ETQ has an academy, we call it ETQ Academy, and it's a variety of on-demand trainings. And we also have a customer community, online community, where you can connect with your peers and kind of learn best practices and problem solve together. So lots of resources that they have taken advantage of, and it's given them a leg up on their adoption training. So after 2 years, their journey is still continuing. They're rolling out to more sites, and this story is actually captured. I'd love for you all to check this out, because there's so much more detail that was shared. This was a recent webinar, a Quality Digest hosted webinar, and you can find this the webinar link through our website. I didn't quite see it on the Quality Digest website, but for sure on etq.com, if you just search Materion, you'll find the link to register and view the folks at Materion going into a lot of detail around their considerations and their project plan, and kind of what they have planned for the future. They talk a lot about, Tom talked about setting access levels. They have a lot of requirements around ITAR, so it's very important for them to have, security on who can view what. So there was a lot of planning around that. So encourage you to check out that story. All right, we're gonna wrap it up. So we have just a couple minutes to address the questions. So with ETQ, you're in good company. So in addition to Materion, we do serve hundreds of customers of all shapes and sizes across many industries, but they all recognize the value of investing in quality for that competitive advantage. And you can see here this, getting a sense of our range and the value of pardon me, the value of our cross-industry approach is pretty significant. We apply learnings and best practices across industries. For example, and these might be components of an accelerate or an expand phase that are APQP practices from automotive. From automotive product design has enriched how we've built our new product introduction application set. Customer management from life sciences has really informed our customer feedback capabilities for our non-conforming materials application. So there's a lot of crossover, a lot of cross-pollinating on processes, and it's, yep, I'm gonna move on. Okay, so no matter where you are in your journey, we're ready to help. From calculating that ROI for your business case, to mapping out your deployment strategy, to providing the level of onboarding support you need. So we look forward to hopefully working with all of you in the future. So before we get to the Q&A, I just want to mention there are other webinars in this series, and we'll be continuing on with more in the future. And you can grab those after you watch the Materion webinar. Check out these others. And here we are. Oh, just a quick note, the next session coming up April 20th, 2 p.m. As Tom mentioned, we'll be talking at the accelerate phase of quality journey. So Tom, we do have a couple of questions. All right, so back when you were talking about the Reliance platform, what cloud platform, and Stephen asked, what cloud platform, please? Is it Azure, AWS?
It's AWS.
Yep, great. And he did also ask about if the session is being recorded. It is, yes, and we will send the link afterwards. And let's see, we have another question. Can you touch on your pricing model, please? So maybe we could talk a little about just how it's structured.
Yeah. So the reason we have the journey that we just discussed, we package our system to allow you to address the journey and only get what you need for the journey. So for example, the core application set is available as a starting point. So there's a certain price for that. And we license our system concurrently. So that means that you might have 100 people, but a 10 concurrent license, which means that any 10 people, excuse me, can log into the system at any given time. So you can grow, and it's not, you don't have to buy each individual seat for each individual user. So it's really going to be based on concurrent licenses as well as the application set or sets that you choose. So the first application set would be the core that we showed earlier, and then you can add additional application sets as you go that include, as I mentioned, about 4 applications each. So we'll be highlighting some of those throughout the series. It's the same license structure, it's just adding additional applications onto the platform. You might have seen, even though we had a brief look at just a few apps, that everything looks and feels the same. So the goal is that it's extremely intuitive and easy to use. So that's at a high level how the licensing works. We do have full licenses, and we also have a separate set of concurrent reader licenses for users that are just going to be looking up documents and participating in training, as I described. So the user that I logged in as initially would be a reader, basically, which is a lower cost per user or per concurrent user price, which allows you to extend the use of the system to many additional people that are not participating in day-to-day tasks in the system.
Great, thank you for that additional insight. Okay, Craig asks, can you comment on the difference between a QMS and a QCS, a quality control system?
Yes, we can. So quality control is more around plant floor. So it's around your process inspections, KPIs, in process and system and control, or process and control, CPK. So those kinds of things are really more of a quality control system, which actually is what Hexagon brings to the table. With ETQ and ETQ Reliance, we're more of a quality management system or quality assurance system. So we help you manage the quality system. We help manage issues. Uh, but there happen to be some nice integration points with quality control systems, things like an issue is identified in the plant during a regular inspection, which could be using a device that's automated, like something that Hexagon provides. It triggers a nonconformance because it's out of spec. Through an integration, it passes it right to our system. And we'll be discussing nonconformance in our next session on April 20th, where there's a process for defining the issue, which happens automatically from the integration, dispositioning it, putting it on hold, moving it in the warehouse, which we can also do through an integration, evaluating the issue, and then perhaps launching a corrective action, which would be a similar corrective action to the process we talked about from audits. So there is a difference. And when Angela mentioned earlier, the synergy of the relationship between ETQ and Hexagon is that we can go from the plant floor, which is more the Hexagon side, all the way to the top floor, which is all around accumulating the data, managing your issues, maintaining continuous improvement, and even getting better at it because of automation. So we appreciate that question. That was a really very insightful question.
Yeah, yep, great. Thank you, Craig and Tom. Okay, well, I think that's it for today. We thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate all your wonderful insights, Tom. You're a true quality professional and an expert, and always great to hear your insights, and walking through the demo is really great. So, all
Thanks for
right,
having me.
we'll see you guys next month. Take care.